My wife told me to go home at the airport. I said okay and walked away. The airport. The departure gate at Atlanta's airport buzzed with the familiar sound of rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, and excited conversations. Families compared vacation plans. Children pressed their faces against the windows to watch airplanes taxi across the runway. Business travelers stared at laptops, counting the minutes until boarding. The Carter family stood in the middle of all. Their vacation had been planned for almost a year. For Mason, it meant finally seeing his favorite soccer team play in person. For 13-year-old Lily, it meant sketching famous landmarks in the notebook she carried everywhere. For Rebecca, it was supposed to be a chance to breathe. For Ethan, it was supposed to be the weekend that reminded them they were still a family. Boarding had been delayed by 30 minutes. Ethan didn't mind. He had always been the steady one. While other passengers complained, he calmly checked the boarding passes one more time before slipping them back into the travel wallet. "Passports?" he asked with a smile. Mason rolled his eyes. "Dad, you've checked like 6 times." "5," Ethan corrected. "I counted." Lily laughed. "I still can't find my headphones." "They're probably in the front pocket of your backpack," Ethan said. She unzipped it. A second later, she smiled. "They are." "I told you Dad could find anything," Mason teased. Rebecca smiled politely, but her attention wasn't on the conversation. Her phone vibrated. She glanced down. Her expression changed for only a moment before she locked the screen and slipped it back in her pocket. Ethan noticed. He had been noticing little things for weeks. Late meetings, short conversations, long silences, smiles that seemed to belong somewhere else. Still, he walked over quietly. "You okay?" Rebecca looked up. For a heartbeat, Ethan saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen in months. Fear, regret, maybe even relief. It disappeared almost instantly. Another vibration came from her phone. Rebecca closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something inside her seemed to break. "Go home, Ethan." The words were louder than she intended. Nearby conversations stopped. A couple sitting across the gate looked over. A little boy lowered his coloring book. Even the gate agent glanced up from the computer. Ethan blinked. He wasn't confused. He had imagined many difficult conversations. Just not this one. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "You're ruining this trip." The silence around them became almost unbearable. Mason looked from his mother to his father. "What are you talking about?" he asked quietly. No one answered. Lily instinctively stepped closer to Ethan until her shoulder brushed against his arm. She didn't fully understand what was happening. She only knew something felt terribly wrong. Ethan looked at Rebecca for a long moment. Not with anger, not with resentment, only with exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes after carrying hope for far longer than anyone realizes. He nodded once. "Okay." That single word sounded almost gentle. He handed the travel wallet to Mason. "Take care of your sister." Mason stared at him. "Dad." Ethan rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "I love you, buddy." Then he looked at Lily. "I'll see you soon." Her eyes were already filling with tears. "Are you coming later?" she whispered. Ethan forced a small smile. "I don't know." Those 3 words hurt more than anything else he had said. Without another sentence, he turned around. His footsteps echoed softly across the polished airport floor. No shouting followed him. No one called his name. He didn't look back. Every step felt heavier than the last. Behind him, Rebecca remained frozen. This wasn't how she imagined the moment. She had expected an argument. Questions. Anger. Anything but quiet acceptance. Instead, he simply left. For the first time in 17 years, Ethan Carter stopped trying to hold together a marriage that had already begun falling apart. Several minutes passed before anyone moved. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Passengers lined up. The gate agent smiled as if nothing unusual had happened. Life continued around them. But inside the Carter family, everything had changed. Mason finally broke the silence. "Mom, is Dad coming?" Rebecca looked toward the hallway where Ethan had disappeared. She opened her mouth. No words came out. For the first time, she realized she had no idea what he was going to do next, and that frightened her more than she expected. Meanwhile, Ethan walked through the airport without knowing where he was going. He wasn't thinking about the vacation. He wasn't thinking about the embarrassment. He wasn't even thinking about Rebecca. He was thinking about one simple question. How had two people who once couldn't wait to spend every day together reached the point where walking away hurt less than staying? He found an empty seat inside the airport lounge and slowly lowered himself into it. For the first time all morning, there was silence. No children asking questions. No boarding announcements directed at him. No one needing him to solve another problem. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His hands trembled, not from anger, from heartbreak. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he stopped pretending everything was okay. Sometimes the loudest moment in a relationship isn't the argument. It's the silence that comes after one person finally stops fighting. 48 hours earlier, the Carter home felt exactly the way it always had before a family vacation. Suitcases sat open across the bedroom floors. Lily carefully folded sketchbooks and colored pencils into her backpack, making sure nothing could bend the pages. Mason walked through the house wearing his favorite soccer jersey, talking nonstop about the championship match they were finally going to see. "Dad," he called from the hallway, "do you think we'll get close enough for the players to sign my jersey?" Ethan smiled without looking up from the suitcase he was packing. "If we get there early, we've got a chance." Mason grinned. "I knew booking those early tickets would pay off." Lily laughed. "I just hope Dad doesn't pack the whole garage this time." Ethan looked offended. "I only pack what's necessary." She reached into his suitcase and held up 6 identical phone chargers. "Necessary?" The room erupted with laughter. Even Rebecca laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from the corners of her eyes. For one beautiful moment, nothing seemed broken. The sound of laughter filled the house. The kind of laughter that makes a family feel safe. Later that evening, after the children had gone upstairs, the house settled into its familiar quiet. Rebecca stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing the last dinner plate. Ethan sat at the table answering emails from clients. The glow from his laptop reflected in his glasses. Rebecca looked over at him. "Ethan," he kept typing. She hesitated. "Do you think we could have one weekend where work doesn't come with us?" That made him stop typing. He looked up and smiled. "That's the whole point of this trip." "I know." She forced a smile. "I just mean..." She searched for the right words. "I miss having your full attention." Ethan reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "After this vacation, I promise." Before she could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "A client. I'll only be a minute." Rebecca nodded. "Of course." She watched him leave the kitchen while already answering the call. She stood alone for several seconds. Then she quietly opened one of the kitchen drawers. Inside rested an unopened marriage counseling brochure. Beneath it lay 2 movie tickets that had expired months earlier. Folded neatly beside them was a handwritten note. "Dinner Friday. Just us. No phones." The paper had softened along the edges from being opened and closed too many times. She slowly folded it again. closed the drawer, and turned off the kitchen light. The next morning moved quickly. School lunches, coffee, backpacks, travel checklists. Everyone seemed busy. Rebecca's phone vibrated on the kitchen island. She reached for it almost immediately, a little faster than she normally would. She read the screen, smiled faintly, then slipped the phone into her purse before anyone else could see it. Ethan noticed. He didn't ask about it. He told himself it wasn't important. People smiled at messages every day. That afternoon, Rebecca texted, "Running late. Client meeting. Don't wait for dinner." The following evening, another message. Another late meeting. By the third night, dinner had grown cold before she walked through the front door. She apologized. She looked tired. She kissed Ethan on the cheek. Everything seemed normal. Except it didn't. Not anymore. None of those moments proved anything. Late meetings happened. Busy seasons happened. People became distracted. But when Ethan lay awake beside Rebecca that night, he realized something that frightened him. He couldn't remember the last time they talked about anything deeper than work schedules, grocery lists, or the kids' activities. The silence between them hadn't appeared overnight. It had been growing, one ordinary day at a time. Down the hallway, Mason excitedly taped the vacation itinerary to his bedroom wall. Only 2 more days. Lily filled another page in her sketchbook. She drew their family standing together in front of the stadium. Everyone was smiling. She carefully colored Ethan's shirt blue because she said blue was his happiest color. Rebecca passed by her bedroom. She stopped, looked at the drawing, and quietly smiled. Then her smile slowly disappeared. She closed Lily's door without saying a word. Across the hall, Ethan stood alone in his bedroom. He looked at the packed suitcases, then toward the closed kitchen drawer downstairs. He didn't know about the counseling brochure. He didn't know about the movie tickets. He didn't know about the folded note Rebecca had written months ago. He only knew something inside their marriage had changed. And for the first time, he wasn't sure how to fix it. Sometimes the end of a marriage doesn't begin with betrayal. Sometimes it begins with 2 people quietly missing each other while living under the same roof. One loose thread. The next morning, Ethan tried to convince himself he was overthinking everything. People worked late. Meetings ran long. Phones buzzed. Life got busy. After 17 years of marriage, surely he owed Rebecca the benefit of the doubt. So he buried the uneasy feeling and focused on work. At the construction site, a young carpenter accidentally measured a window opening 2 inches too wide. The apprentice looked terrified. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I'll fix it." Ethan studied the mistake and smiled. "What can be replaced? Just don't make the same mistake twice." The apprentice nodded with relief. For Ethan, every problem had always seemed reparable. A cracked beam, a leaking roof, a delayed project. Everything had a solution if people worked together. He had built his career on that belief. He had built his marriage on it too. By late afternoon, Rebecca called. "I'm sorry. Another meeting came up. You don't have to wait for dinner." Ethan looked at the white lilies beside his desk. "No problem," he said gently. "Drive safely." After hanging up, he stared at the bouquet. Maybe tonight wasn't the right night. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow they would finally stop pretending everything was fine. The following afternoon, Ethan finished work early and decided to surprise Rebecca at her office. At the marketing firm's lobby, the receptionist smiled. "I'm here to surprise my wife." She checked the computer. "Oh, Rebecca left about an hour ago." Ethan frowned. "I thought she had meetings this afternoon." The receptionist looked confused. "Our client meetings ended before lunch." A brief silence filled the room. "Maybe she had something scheduled outside the office," she added quickly. "I'm sure she did." Ethan replied. Back in his truck, the flowers rested quietly on the passenger seat. He wanted to believe there was a simple explanation. Traffic, an appointment, coffee with a friend, anything. But something deep inside him whispered a truth he wasn't ready to hear. He leaned forward and rested his forehead against the steering wheel. A single tear slipped down his face. No one had seen. No one ever did. When Rebecca arrived home that evening, the flowers were already in a vase on the kitchen table. They're beautiful, she said softly. You remembered. I always remember. She kissed his cheek. For a second, Ethan almost asked where she had really been. Then he looked into her eyes. She looked tired. She looked guilty. And she looked like someone carrying a burden she couldn't explain. I'm glad you like them, he said. That night, they ate dinner with the children. Mason talked excitedly about the soccer stadium. Lily described all the places she wanted to sketch. Rebecca laughed at the right moments. Ethan smiled when everyone else smiled. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family. After dinner, Rebecca stepped outside to answer a phone call. She said it was work. Through the kitchen window, Ethan watched her. She wasn't talking much, mostly listening. Then, for the first time in weeks, he saw her smile. Not the polite smile she wore at dinner. This one was effortless. It reached her eyes. She looked lighter. A few moments later, she came back inside as though nothing had happened. Ethan said nothing. He didn't want to become a suspicious husband searching for evidence. He wanted to become a better husband. He just wasn't sure if he was already too late. The next morning, Rebecca rushed around the kitchen. Ethan, could you do me a favor? Of course. My presentation is saved on the family computer. Could you email it to Claire? I'm running late. After she left, Ethan found the file and typed the address. Claire Brooks. The name felt familiar. Rebecca had mentioned Claire often over the past few months. Claire says, Claire thinks, Claire recommended. Nothing about it seemed suspicious. Still, the name stayed with him long after he clicked send. That evening, one of the lilies drifted silently onto the table. Ethan picked up the fallen petal and held it for a moment. Some things don't stop fading all at once. They fade one day, one conversation, one unanswered question at a time. Sometimes the first sign that something is broken isn't a loud crack. It's the quiet moment when you realize you're the only one still trying to hold the pieces together. The last chance. The morning before the trip arrived with the usual rush of activity. Suitcases lined the hallway. Phone chargers sat neatly in Ethan's travel bag. Lily walked through the house, checking off items on her handwritten packing list. Sketchbook, colored pencils, camera. She smiled proudly. I'm ready. Mason wasn't nearly as calm. He had already checked the weather 3 times and watched videos of the stadium they were about to visit. This is going to be the best weekend ever, he said. I can feel it. Ethan smiled. I hope you're right. Margaret arrived just before lunch. She had promised to water the plants while they were away. Lily ran to hug her grandmother. Grandma, look. She proudly showed her the sketches she'd packed for the trip. Margaret smiled warmly. They're beautiful. She hugged Lily tightly before looking toward Ethan. One glance was enough. Something wasn't right. Later that afternoon, Ethan escaped to his workshop behind the house. The familiar smell of fresh-cut cedar usually calmed him. Today it didn't. A custom picture frame rested on his workbench. One corner had developed a small crack during assembly. Anyone else would have thrown it away and started over. Ethan reached for the wood glue instead. Margaret quietly stepped inside. She watched him work for a moment before speaking. Are you fixing the frame? Or trying not to think? Ethan gave a tired smile. Maybe both. She walked beside him. For a while, Neither of them said anything. Only the soft sound of sandpaper filled the room. Finally, Ethan spoke. I don't know what's happening anymore. Margaret waited. I keep telling myself everything has an explanation, but every explanation creates another question. His voice grew quieter. I think I'm losing her. Margaret gently rested a hand on his shoulder. When your father was sick, I spent months pretending he was getting better. I wasn't lying to anyone else. I was lying to myself. Ethan lowered his eyes. I don't want to believe my marriage is ending. I know. She smiled sadly. Pain speaks first. Truth usually waits. Those words stayed with Ethan long after Margaret returned to the house. That evening, the family ate dinner together. Conversation came easily. Mason talked about the players he hoped to meet. Lily wondered if she'd see any famous artists while they were away. Rebecca laughed. Ethan laughed too. Anyone watching through the window would have seen a happy family preparing for vacation. No one would have guessed they were sharing one of their last dinners as husband and wife. Later that night, the children went upstairs. Margaret headed home. Rebecca fell asleep on the living room couch while reading through tomorrow's travel itinerary. The television played quietly in the background. Ethan sat across the room pretending to read. Rebecca's phone vibrated once on the coffee table. The screen lit up. He looked away. Then it vibrated again. For several long seconds, he stared at the glowing screen without moving. He had never searched through Rebecca's phone. He never wanted to become that man. Finally, he stood, not to read the message, only to turn the phone over so the light wouldn't wake her. As he reached for it, a single notification appeared before the screen locked. Thank you for today. I needed you. No name, no heart emoji, no explanation, just one sentence. Simple, gentle, intimate, enough to make Ethan's hand freeze. He quietly turned the phone over without unlocking it. He didn't scroll. He didn't search. He didn't need to. The words echoed inside his mind. Thank you for today. I needed you. He sat back down. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider a possibility he had been refusing to face. Maybe Rebecca wasn't just drifting away. Maybe someone else had become the place she turned when life felt heavy. A few minutes later, exhaustion finally caught up with him. He stretched out on the opposite couch. The vacation itinerary slipped from his hands onto the floor. Sometime after midnight, Rebecca opened her eyes. She looked across the room. Ethan was asleep. One arm rested across his chest. The itinerary lay scattered beside him. She noticed the flowers on the kitchen table. Several more petals had fallen. She slowly stood, walked toward Ethan. For a long moment, she simply watched him sleep. She remembered the young man who had danced with her in their first apartment because they couldn't afford furniture. The man who worked double shifts so she could finish graduate school. The father who never missed a single one of Lily's school plays. The husband who always believed tomorrow would be enough. Tears filled her eyes. She almost woke him, almost confessed everything. Almost admitted she no longer recognized the woman she had become. Instead, she bent down, picked up the fallen itinerary, placed it neatly back on the coffee table, turned off the lamp, and quietly walked upstairs. Ethan never opened his eyes. Neither of them slept well that night. Outside, the wind scattered a few white lily petals across the kitchen table. By morning, only a handful remained on the stems. Neither Ethan nor Rebecca realized they had just lived through the last ordinary night their family would ever share together. The next time they stood side by side would be at the airport. And after that, nothing would ever be the same. Sometimes a marriage isn't destroyed by one terrible decision. Sometimes it's lost in the quiet moments when two people both want to speak, and neither one does. I walked away. The next morning began like every family vacation Ethan could remember. Before sunrise, he was the first one awake. He loaded the suitcases into the SUV, checked the passports, and made sure everyone had breakfast. Rebecca moved through the house quietly. She smiled when the children spoke to her, but she barely looked at Ethan. The drive to the airport was almost silent. Mason tried to fill the emptiness. I still can't believe we're actually going. Lily smiled. I'm bringing my sketchbook everywhere. Ethan glanced at them in the mirror. I'm looking forward to seeing what you draw. Rebecca stared out the window, quietly wiping away a tear. By the time they reached the airport, the morning rush had begun. Families hurried through security. Children laughed. Flight announcements echoed through the terminal. For everyone else, it was the beginning of a vacation. For the Carter family, it was the end of something much bigger. After checking their bags, they made their way to the gate. Boarding was delayed. 30 minutes. Then 45. The extra time only made the silence heavier. Rebecca's phone vibrated. She read the message and locked the screen. Ethan noticed. You okay? Rebecca looked at him. She had wanted this trip to give her one last chance to figure everything out. Instead, his quiet kindness only made the guilt harder to carry. She wanted to tell him everything, but fear spoke before honesty could. Go home, Ethan. The conversations around them stopped. You're ruining this trip. The words hung in the air. Mason stared at his mother. Mom. Lily moved beside Ethan. Dad. No one moved. Ethan looked into Rebecca's eyes. He didn't see anger. He saw someone exhausted from hiding. For a brief second, he remembered the late meetings, the messages, and the flowers slowly losing their petals. He realized something painful. He had spent weeks looking for proof. He didn't need proof anymore. He only needed to accept what his heart already knew. He nodded once. Okay. The single word sounded almost peaceful. He handed the travel wallet to Mason. You're in charge until you get home. Dad, don't go. Ethan squeezed his son's shoulder. I love you. Then he kissed Lily's forehead. I'll see you soon. She wrapped her arms around him. Please come with us. For a moment, he almost stayed, almost pretended nothing had happened. Then he gently let go. I can't. He turned and walked away. Each step echoed across the polished floor. Rebecca watched him disappear into the crowd. She had expected him to argue, to fight for the marriage one more time. Instead, he simply respected the words she had spoken. For the first time since they met, Ethan didn't chase after her. He accepted her decision and made one his own. A few minutes later, he found a quiet seat in the airport lounge. He opened the airline app. 4 names. 4 seats. 1 family. His finger hovered over the screen. He remembered Mason learning to ride a bicycle, Lily sleeping on his shoulder during their first road trip, Rebecca laughing as they painted the nursery. 17 years. Thousands of ordinary memories. He swallowed hard, then canceled only one reservation. His own. A moment later, he booked the next available flight home. His phone rang. Rebecca. Ethan. Her voice shook. Where are you? I'm going home. A long silence followed. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I know. Another silence. Finally, he spoke. I spent years believing that if I worked harder, if I provided more, we'd find our way back to each other. His voice remained calm. But love isn't something one person can carry alone. Rebecca closed her eyes. I'm sorry. I know. Another pause. This time, Ethan said quietly, I'm choosing to stop chasing someone who already walked away. He ended the call. Across the terminal, the boarding announcement echoed. Passengers lined up. Families laughed. Life moved forward, as it always does. Rebecca looked toward the hallway where Ethan had disappeared. For the first time, she realized that the quiet man she had always depended on was no longer waiting for her to decide whether he mattered. He already had. She boarded the flight with Mason and Lily. No one spoke during takeoff. The vacation had begun, but the family Ethan had spent 17 years building had already started coming apart. Miles below the clouds, a plane carrying Ethan lifted into the sky. It wasn't taking him away from his family. It was carrying him toward the hardest chapter of his life. Sometimes the strongest goodbye isn't spoken with anger. Sometimes it's whispered by the person who finally realizes that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. The hardest question. The vacation looked perfect in every photograph. Bright sunshine, packed stadiums, beautiful streets, smiling faces. Anyone scrolling through those pictures would have believed the Carter family was making memories they would treasure forever. The truth never appeared in a single photo. Mason noticed it first. His mother laughed less than she used to. Lily stayed unusually quiet. Every few hours, Rebecca would drift away, saying she needed to answer a work message or make a quick call. She always returned with the same tired smile, the smile that never quite reached her eyes. On the second afternoon, they finally arrived at the stadium Mason had dreamed of visiting for years. His excitement briefly pushed everything else aside. "This is incredible," he shouted. "I can't believe we're actually here." Rebecca smiled. "I'm glad you're happy." For a little while, she almost believed things could still be repaired. They found their seats. The crowd erupted as the players entered the field. Mason took dozens of pictures. Lily sketched the stadium instead of watching the warm-ups. Rebecca sat between them, trying to stay present. At halftime, Mason stood. "I'm getting snacks." "I'll come with you," Lily said. Rebecca smiled. "I'll wait here." A few minutes later, someone called her name. "Rebecca." She turned. Claire stood a few rows away. She had been attending a marketing conference in the same city and decided to watch the match afterward. "What are the chances?" Claire laughed. Rebecca smiled with genuine surprise. "I had no idea you were here." Claire hugged her warmly. "You look exhausted." "I probably do." Claire studied her face. "You've been carrying the whole world on your shoulders." Rebecca looked away. "I don't even know what I'm doing anymore." Claire rested a hand on her arm. "You don't have to pretend you're okay." Rebecca closed her eyes for a second. It wasn't a romantic embrace. It was simply the comfort of someone who had been listening to her for months. But from the wrong angle, it could easily be misunderstood. At that exact moment, several rows away, Mason pulled out his phone. He wanted to send Ethan a picture of the packed stadium. Instead, he accidentally pressed the video call button. Back home, Ethan sat alone in his workshop, sanding the edge of a dining table. His phone buzzed. Mason video calling. A smile spread across his face. "Hey, buddy." Before he could finish, the camera showed Rebecca. Claire's hand still rested on her arm. Rebecca leaned forward for another brief hug before stepping back. Neither woman noticed the phone. The image lasted only a few seconds. Then the call ended. The workshop fell silent. Ethan stared at the blank screen. Not because he had finally caught Rebecca doing something unforgivable, but because he suddenly understood something heartbreaking. Claire wasn't just a coworker. She had become the person Rebecca turned to when life became difficult. The emotional place that once belonged to him now belonged to someone else. Thousands of miles away, Mason slowly lowered his phone. He wasn't old enough to understand everything, but he understood enough. Confusion, then realization, then grief. The rest of the match passed in silence. Even after his favorite team won, Mason barely celebrated. On the flight home, he spent most of the journey staring out the window. Lily quietly sketched the clouds. Rebecca noticed the distance growing between them. She wanted to ask what was wrong, but she was afraid she already knew. 2 days later, Mason found Ethan sitting on the back porch just before sunset. The backyard was quiet. Only the sound of birds filled the evening air. "Hey," Ethan said. Mason sat beside him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mason asked, "Dad, are we still a family?" The words hit Ethan harder than anything Rebecca had ever said. His eyes filled with tears. He placed an arm around his son's shoulders. "We're always going to be a family." Mason looked down. "But everything's different." "I know. Does that mean Mom doesn't love us anymore?" Ethan answered immediately. "No. Your mom loves both of you more than anything. Adults sometimes make painful mistakes, but those mistakes are never the children's fault." Mason nodded slowly. "I just miss how things used to be." Ethan pulled him into a hug. "So do I." Inside the house, Lily wandered into Ethan's workshop. On the workbench sat the unfinished wooden picture frame he had started repairing days earlier. Without saying a word, she picked up a piece of sandpaper and carefully smoothed the rough edge. Ethan watched from the doorway. She wasn't repairing a picture frame. She was trying to repair a feeling she couldn't put into words. Together, they placed a family photograph inside the finished frame. It showed the four of them smiling on a beach years earlier, before work became constant, before silence became normal, before anyone started walking away. Lily looked up. "Can we keep this one?" Ethan smiled through his tears. "Always." He placed the frame on the shelf above his workbench, not because it reminded him of what they had lost, but because it reminded him that beautiful memories remain true, even after life changes. Sometimes the hardest question a child can ask has no perfect answer. All a parent can do is hold them close and make sure they never face the pain alone. Coffee. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, not because life had stopped, because everyone had grown tired of fighting. Lawyers exchanged paperwork. Calendars replaced conversations. The children slowly adjusted to spending time in two different homes. Nothing about it felt natural. Mason no longer left his soccer cleats by the front door. He kept one pair at Ethan's house and another at Rebecca's apartment. Lily divided her art supplies into 2 boxes, one for each bedroom. She never complained. But every time she packed one into the car, Ethan noticed she became a little quieter. The divorce moved forward without shouting, without courtroom drama, without revenge. Just 2 people signing papers they had never imagined signing on their wedding day. One rainy Thursday morning, Ethan's phone buzzed. "Can we talk?" Just once. No lawyers. No kids. He stared at the message for a long time. Then typed one word. "Okay." They agreed to meet that afternoon at a small coffee shop across town. It was the same place where they had spent countless Saturday mornings during the first years of their marriage, back when the future seemed endless. Ethan arrived early. He ordered black coffee, the same way he always had. Rebecca walked in carrying an umbrella. She looked different, not because of her clothes, because the confidence she once carried had been replaced by quiet regret. "Hi, hi." For nearly a minute, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply honest. Rebecca wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I've practiced this conversation 100 times. Ethan gave a faint smile. "So have I." She laughed softly. It was the first genuine laugh either of them had shared in months. Then it faded. "I kept waiting for you to ask if I was okay." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." She looked down. I don't think I even knew how to explain what I was feeling. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to destroy our family. I just disappeared. She looked up. Somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like your wife. I felt like another responsibility you were trying to take care of. Tears filled her eyes. You worked so hard for us. You gave us everything. But I started missing the one thing I wanted most. You. Ethan listened without interrupting. Finally, he spoke. I thought showing up every day was my way of asking if you were okay. I thought providing for our family meant I was loving you. Rebecca nodded. I know, and I should have told you before I reached the point where someone else was listening. She swallowed hard. Claire didn't steal me from you. I walked there one conversation at a time. I'll let someone else become the person I talked to first. I should have ended our marriage before I started leaning on someone else. I'm sorry. The words hung between them. Real. Painful. Long overdue. Ethan looked out the rain-covered window. Then back at Rebecca. I believe you're sorry. She closed her eyes. You do. I do. A tear rolled down her cheek. But believing you're sorry, he said quietly, isn't the same as believing we should start over. Rebecca lowered her head. I know. I understand loneliness, Ethan continued. I understand feeling invisible. What I don't understand, he paused, is beginning another chapter before finishing the one we promised each other. Rebecca covered her face with both hands. The tears came freely, not because he had raised his voice, but because he hadn't. I'm ashamed, she whispered. I hurt the one person who never stopped trying. Ethan reached across the table, not to hold her hand, only to slide a napkin toward her. A simple act of kindness. Nothing more. I wasn't perfect either, he admitted. I confused responsibility with presence. I thought every overtime shift was another way of saying I love you. I didn't realize you needed my attention more than my paycheck. For the first time in years, neither of them was defending themselves. They were simply telling the truth they should have shared long before the airport, long before the silence, long before the goodbye. Eventually, the rain began to slow. Rebecca looked at Ethan one last time. I hope one day you find someone who never makes you question whether you're enough. Ethan smiled gently. I think the next person I need to find is the version of myself that my children deserve. Rebecca nodded. I think that's a good place to start. They stood. For one brief moment, 17 years of memories seemed to stand between them. Their wedding, the births of Mason and Lily, family vacations, Christmas mornings, ordinary Tuesdays that once felt unimportant. None of those memories disappeared because the marriage had ended. They would always belong to both of them. Rebecca picked up her umbrella. I'm glad we talked. So am I. She turned toward the door. Just before stepping outside, she looked back. Not with hope, not with regret, simply gratitude. Then she walked away. Ethan remained in the coffee shop for several more minutes. He finished the last sip of his coffee and looked out at the clearing sky. For the first time since the airport, he didn't feel angry. He didn't even feel heartbroken. He simply felt ready. Ready to stop living inside yesterday. Ready to begin building whatever came next. Forgiveness doesn't always rebuild a relationship. Sometimes it simply gives two people permission to stop carrying the past and begin walking toward different futures. Building again. Life didn't become easier after the divorce. It became quieter. The silence inside Ethan's house felt different now. Not empty, just unfamiliar. For the first few weeks, he caught himself setting 4 plates on the dinner table before remembering there were only 3 people coming that evening. Old habits took time to disappear. Some never did. Every other Friday, Mason and Lily arrived with backpacks slung over their shoulders. They no longer knocked. They simply walked inside. Dad, we're home. Those words became Ethan's favorite sound. He learned to treasure the ordinary moments he had once taken for granted, helping Mason clean his muddy soccer cleats after practice, driving across town just to watch a 40-minute game, sitting beside Lily while she painted quietly at the kitchen table. One Saturday afternoon, Lily looked up from her sketchbook. Dad, yes, sweetheart. I like it when your phone stays on the counter. Ethan smiled. It does. She nodded. It means you're really here. Her words stopped him. She wasn't accusing him. She was simply telling the truth. From that day forward, Ethan made himself a promise. Whenever his children were with him, work could wait. If a client called during dinner, the call went to voicemail. If emails arrived during Mason's soccer match, they stayed unread. If the house they were building could wait until Monday, so could he. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt freeing. One afternoon, while watching Mason's team practice, another father sat beside him. I've seen you at every game this season. Ethan smiled. I've missed too many already. The man nodded. I know what you mean. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan noticed something changing. Not around him. Inside him. He laughed more. He slept better. He no longer woke up wondering what he could have done differently. Healing wasn't forgetting. Healing was finally accepting that the past couldn't be rebuilt. Only the future could. Meanwhile, the custom home Ethan had started months earlier was nearly complete. He visited the construction site every morning. Concrete had become walls. Walls had become rooms. Rooms had become a place where another family would someday celebrate birthdays, holidays, and ordinary Tuesday dinners. As he walked through the finished house one afternoon, he paused in the living room. Sunlight poured through the large windows. Children's voices echoed from the neighboring yard. He smiled. For months, he believed he was simply building another house. Now he understood something deeper. Every careful measurement, every repaired mistake, every steady brick had quietly been rebuilding him too. A few days later, the new owners arrived. A young couple. Two little boys raced through the front door before their parents could stop them. Can this be my room? No. I saw it first. Their laughter filled the empty house. The young mother turned to Ethan. It's beautiful. He looked around one last time. No. He smiled. It'll be beautiful when you fill it with memories. As he walked back to his truck, Margaret was waiting beside it. She had insisted on seeing the finished home before the keys changed hands. She looked toward the house and smiled. You know, your father used to say something. Ethan looked at her. What was that? A strong house isn't the one that never cracks. She paused. It's the one repaired before the damage spreads. Ethan smiled. I finally understand. Margaret slipped her arm through his. I think you do. That evening, Mason arrived carrying exciting news. Dad, I made varsity. Ethan's face lit up. You did? Mason nodded proudly. The coach said I've earned a starting position. Without thinking, Ethan wrapped him in the biggest hug he'd given him in years. I'm so proud of you. Across the room, Lily held up a painting she'd been working on for weeks. Dad, I'm finished. He walked over. The painting showed a small house sitting beneath a bright blue sky. The roof had one tiny crack, but colorful flowers surrounded it. A family stood together on the front porch. They were smiling. Ethan looked closely. There are only 3 people. Lily nodded. I know. She hesitated. Sometimes families look different, but they're still families. Ethan felt his eyes fill with tears. He hugged her tightly. You always know exactly what to say. She laughed. I didn't say much. No. He smiled. But your painting did. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Ethan stood alone on the back porch. The The stars stretched across the sky. A cool breeze moved through the trees. For the first time in over a year, he wasn't thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about everything he had found. Time with his children, peace inside himself, a life no longer measured only by success at work. His phone buzzed. A new project inquiry. He looked at the screen, then smiled. It could wait until morning. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked inside. Some opportunities were too important to interrupt. Family was one of them. Sometimes rebuilding your life doesn't begin with finding someone new. Sometimes it begins the moment you become fully present for the people who never stopped choosing you. Home. 1 year later, the stadium was louder than Ethan remembered. Flags waved in the air. Drums echoed across the stands. The championship final had drawn a crowd that filled every seat. Mason stood in the tunnel with his team, adjusting his jersey. He looked older now, more confident, less like a boy trying to prove himself, and more like someone who already knew who he was. Ethan sat in the front row of the stands. Margaret was beside him, holding a small thermos of tea. Lily sat on the other side, sketchbook open on her lap. She wasn't drawing the field this time. She was drawing the crowd, the life around her, the moment itself. Ethan glanced at his phone. No missed calls, no urgent emails, just silence, peaceful silence. Across the stadium, Rebecca arrived quietly. She found a seat alone and watched. The whistle blew. The game began. Mason moved like he had been born for this moment. Fast, focused, controlled. Every time he touched the ball, Ethan leaned forward slightly in his seat. Margaret smiled. He has your patience. Ethan shook his head. He has his own. Lily laughed. And your stubbornness. Ethan smiled. Unfortunately, yes. Minutes passed. The score stayed tied. One chance could decide everything. With only minutes left, Mason broke through two defenders. He ran. The crowd rose. Come on, Mason, Ethan whispered. Lily stopped sketching. Margaret gripped Ethan's arm. Mason took the shot. Time slowed. The ball hit the back of the net. For half a second, there was silence. Then the stadium exploded. Ethan didn't cheer first. He simply stared. Then he laughed. A real laugh. The kind he hadn't felt in years. That's my boy. Lily jumped up. He did it. Margaret clapped with tears in her eyes. Across the stadium, Rebecca stood quietly. She clapped too. Not for herself. Not for Ethan. But for the boy who had survived the breaking of his world and still became something strong. Mason turned toward the stands. He searched for faces. He found Ethan first. Their eyes met. Ethan nodded. Mason nodded back. Pride, love, and everything they had survived. Then Mason looked across the stadium. He saw Rebecca. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he gave her a small nod too. Not forgiveness. Not distance. Just acknowledgement. She smiled through tears. When the final whistle blew, the crowd flooded the field. Players embraced. Parents rushed forward. Ethan stayed in his seat for a moment longer. For once, nothing needed to be rushed. Lily tugged his hand. Come on, Dad. Together, they walked toward the field. Mason reached them first. He didn't say anything. He simply hugged Ethan tightly. Longer than before. Stronger than before. Dad. Ethan closed his eyes. I'm proud of you, Mason whispered. Ethan's voice cracked. I'm proud of you more. Lily ran in next. Group hug. Ethan laughed through tears. He held them close. Not because everything was perfect, but because they were still here. Still together. Still choosing each other. After a moment, Lily looked up. Dad. Yeah. She smiled softly. Let's go home. The words landed differently this time. Not like an ending. Like a beginning. Mason picked up his bag. Yeah, I'm starving. Ethan laughed. Same. They started walking toward the stadium exit. Outside, the evening sky had turned orange. Warm. Calm. Rebecca stood a few meters away, watching. Mason saw her first. He slowed down. For a brief moment, the four of them existed in the same space again. Not as a family that had broken, but as a family that had changed shape. Rebecca gave a small nod. No words. No attempt to rewrite the past. Just respect. Ethan nodded back. Then Rebecca turned and walked away. No one followed, and no one needed to. Ethan, Mason, and Lily continued toward the parking lot. Margaret joined them quietly. The night air felt soft. The world felt lighter than it had in a long time. As they reached the car, Ethan paused and looked back at the stadium lights fading in the distance. Not as a place of loss, but as a place where something painful had finally ended, and something honest had begun. He got into the car, started the engine, and drove home, not to the past, but to the life they had rebuilt together. A life that was not perfect, but real, and enough. Final line. Sometimes home is not a place you return to. It is the people you choose to stay with, even after everything changes. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to join the MindShadow Stories community. Every interaction helps us continue sharing unforgettable stories of love, loss, and redemption. Until next time, thank you for being part of the journey.
Every shadow holds a lesson. Thanks for watching MindShadow Stories. Subscribe for more unforgettable mysteries.